brought it forth, how you birthed it.
This element of a really actually radical vision, and a very creative vision of like, what would it look like to have a world that was organized around beloved community, like from the ways we govern to like our very intimate relationships.
Let me just ask you, do you have a favorite definition of beloved community?
I think the inquiry is what's really important, the inquiry of what it is. So I think definitions are useful, but to me, the inquiry is what's actually important, like, and hearing different people. So I guess my understanding of it, or what I'd say my definition, is informed by the coming together of indigeneity and you know, kind of indigenous worldview, which is very informed by my teachers, and you know, kind of the tradition of beloved communities. So the aspect of a world where everybody belongs, like you know, kind of unconditionally, we are interdependent. All of the children I know are my children, and how and to make sure that we're working towards a world where they all thrive, where we all thrive. And then looking backwards, like our ancestors are our mutual ancestors, and so what do we need to do to heal the rifts and the harms that we've, you know, that have occurred between us? And so that aspect of mutual responsibility, collective thriving, and then the places that need to be repaired and addressed as it being part of our mutual work.
Can you talk to us about the why in the 8 principles or elements for beloved community that you mentioned in the book?
Question kept coming up around like, how do we know what beloved community is? You know, what are the key elements? I'm not like, none of us are saying like you couldn't add an element, but those were the ones that through our time together and through that deep dive, we said, oh, these are pieces we really want to lift up as being feeling important to us.
I always think of it differently. So I love the idea of standing in the arc, and it's the arc of justice, you know. And do you want to say more about that?
So standing in the arc both refers to, yeah, that arc of justice, which is really about having clarity around of purpose and like what's important, right? And navigating towards that. So it's not necessarily, I think sometimes in movement building, we think about like there being a point in time when we win. But I think another way to think about it is like we're always in relationship to our vision and in relationship to our purpose, and it's dynamic. Like we constantly have to work towards being active creators of that. And sometimes conditions are going to be in our favor and sometimes they're not, but the point is to be part of the arc, part of creating that. I think from an Indigenous point of view, it's also about 7 generations, right? And kind of being aware that you're both connected to and living in a way where you see yourself as part of an arc of people, right? Where you come from ancestors and you are essentially an ancestor in training to future generations. And so if you situate yourself as part of that arc, you're not solely responsible for creating the future you want. You come from people and you're passing it on to people. Yeah, so that's essentially what we're talking about in the book. Both like and I think it links together a few things. Like one is like the importance of constantly nurturing, being in relationship to your purpose or your vision. And then also remembering, and also not just remembering that like you have ancestors and descendants, but remembering you're part of a generation right now, like all living beings on this planet right now collectively are part of a generation. And so how might you live in that way?
I'm just going to mention, you don't have to speak to all of them, but I'm just going to mention a few others. Gather with purpose. And the second one is story circles. The third one, habits and practices.
Some of what you're reading, Shirley, are some practices we have, and they overlap with some of the elements. So the practice, like gathering with purpose, is an invitation not to be narrow about that, but like always as an individual and then as a group, ask yourself, why are we here? Like, and essentially that's like, what's important to us? And to me, that's one of the most important questions you can ask. Like I ask my students, like at the very first class, like, why are you here? And if their answer is because it's a requirement, I'm like, okay, dig a little, like, and why else? Why are you spending your time like every day, you know, showing up on campus? Like, if you don't have your own personal reason for being there, you're probably wasting your time, or, you know, you're not getting you know, you're not making the most of that part of your life, you know, and that precious time. But a group together can ask also, why are we here, right? And like the answer will shape a whole lot of things. It will shape like what's worth arguing over, like what's not worth arguing over, what's worth, like what of all the 10 things we could choose to do as a group, which one is most aligned with why we are here and what's important, you know, what's important this week, and then what's important, you know, for a year from now, or, you know, kind of for what we want for the people who will come behind us. But it's a navigation tool, it's an orientation tool, and it's a discernment tool. The other thing, story circles. So I'm a big fan of story work, both because like, I just think it's fun, but also because again, like with story work, there's all sorts of stuff you can do, you know, to uncover like, again, like who you are, like, and where you want to go together. So you know, Shirley joined me yesterday in a session with a group that I work with called Root Rise Pollinate, and we use storytelling as a way to help groups and people think about strategy, and, you know, and also kind of what they want for their communities. And then think about like, what's the work or the project, you know, we might want to do together. So we do future storytelling, and then we do storytelling at turning points, you know, where things aren't all good yet, but they're on the way to, you know, making kind of a big change. And by doing storytelling, instead of, you know, only using our, you know, sort of rational minds, there's possibilities that open up because we're playing, because we're using our creative minds, because we're using our imaginative minds. And as an artist, like that's a lot of what, you know, we do as artists, is like kind of open up room for radical imagination and radical possibility that then can show us things that sometimes we limit ourselves in when we're trying to be rational.
You started with invoking Grace Lee Boggs and some others who have built this movement of beloved community. And Shirley, I know how close beloved community is. It's been something that you've brought to CIIS for a long time, and you've helped me rebirth it through the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And so I wonder if some of you could both of you rather, could give us just a primer of the foundation of beloved communities. Who have been the contributors, and how do you know that it's been used?
Well, I would say that the first person, as far as we know, that used beloved community was a theologian in the 19th century named Josiah Royce. And he said, if there's no evidence of existence, then every policy, every proposed reform should be based on whether and to what extent it advances beloved community. And he said if you can't find it, you need to take steps to create it. And he said, if there's no evidence of its existence, then you need to act so as to hasten its coming. And that just kind of blew my mind. Act so as to hasten its coming. How do I do that? So that was the beginning. Royce was at Boston University, and that's where Martin Luther King got his PhD. And he picked up on this whole notion, and then he applied it to the civil rights movement. And the first time he said it, as far as we can tell, was after the Montgomery bus boycott ended in 1955. And he said to the people, he said, when you go back on the buses, go back in a way with dignity and with grace. And he said the aftermath of violence is bitterness and regrets. He said the aftermath of nonviolence is reconciliation in the beloved community. So he used it in his book on the bus boycott. And then from there, it got referred to in a number of ways. But I think that's the legacy as I know it. And then moving up to Grace Lee Boggs, Grace, I think, spoke to me when she said at a presentation at the University of Illinois, I wonder how things would be different if we were able to combine Malcolm's Black power with King's beloved community. And she said different both intraracially and interracially. And that was the aha moment for me. That said to me that beloved community, or what beloved community represents, is the missing ingredient in the work we do of social activism and justice building.
You know, getting to meet Grace, and then also my teacher, one of my teachers, Punani, you know, what I became aware of was like, there's this whole like universe of people who really took that invitation to heart and became beloved community practitioners, essentially, or like, you know, really in very many different places, there's circles of people and like artists and community builders. Punani was a lawyer, but then she, you know, essentially dropped that and became totally dedicated to facilitating beloved community and integrating that into all different kinds of settings. So to me, kind of what's amazing and what should happen, you know, with any big vision is that people in many different places adopt it and apply it and, you know, kind of make it their own and put it into cultural context of where they are. So I know there was a question around like, why 10,000 beloved communities, what's behind that title? And so that's really what's behind the title is in different traditions, there are, you know, different, you know, symbolic numbers for infinite. And in the Taoist tradition, that's 10,000. And so the aspect of, you know, kind of from those seeds, like infinite number of people can, you know, can be in relationship to this vision and this practice and this commitment, this responsibility to move towards a world that is more interdependent, more collectively responsible to each other, you know, and so that's what I witnessed as part of the legacy, and that's part of what inspired me.